morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined each and every morning by Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton. Guys, tell us where you're checking in from, what you're drinking. Obviously, get your questions in, and we're going to get to those here in just a little bit. But first, Bobby, let's talk about you being on the road. That's a rare occurrence. Usually it's Jerry. You're over there for the SEC meetings in Sandestin, Florida. What have you been learning?
I think college football is about to change, fellas. Fundamentally change. Roster reductions, roster caps, roster restrictions, however you want to coin that term, are coming to college football. At what level, we don't know yet. How, we don't know. That is why yesterday, for example, the coaches meeting at the SEC meeting days, the internal meeting they had, it went 45 minutes to an hour longer. Athletic directors meeting went over. The coaches meet again today. Number one topic, roster size. This is all coming on the heels of the historic settlement that's been mentioned, where 22% of athletic revenue will go towards the players in this House versus the NCAA settlement. So you have that. So there's going to have to be cost reduction in football at some level. Furthermore, you have the scenario where we're looking at it, and all of these things happening at once also has the context of an unknown, and that is Title IX. So the reason they're preparing right now for roster reductions is not only because of money, it's because some of that money, they think, is also going to have to go to women's sports. So they can't overspend on the golden goose, which is college football, by the way, for major college athletics. Now, college basketball can be big for if you're Villanova, right, or somebody like that. But for Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, the big boys, it's football that drives the bus. But you can't leave out Title IX as long as these student athletes are not employees. You know, you can have a college football coach that makes $10 million a year, and your women's basketball coach makes $500,000 to $1 million. You can have that 10-to-1 ratio because guess what? They're employees of the institution, right? The student athletes, at least right now, are not going to be employees.
Well, I think that's where we've always been headed with this, is they're going to end up being employees of a state, right? But
well,
do you think, what are the odds that happens?
Right now, Jerry, there's no clear answer. When I say there's no clear answer, you have the head of the SEC, who, by the way, is a lawyer and articulate, intelligent, knows this stuff inside and out, saying, look, student athletes don't want to be employees at this point. That's not what the CBS is saying.
Of course they don't.
Yeah. And so, you know, could that change? Perhaps. But right now, what we're looking at, the sum of it all, is college football is likely going to have a scholarship reduction or a player reduction. And what do I mean by that? Well, they could still have 85 scholarships, but there may be no walk-ons.
Yeah.
There are, because then you have to have concierge medical care for all those people. I mean, it's all of these things that are going into it right now. And it is very, very interesting sitting down here watching coach after coach go to Mike Elko made an impassioned plea yesterday to keep walk-ons. And the reason he did so is, think about it. It's A&M. It's the 12th man. And in some reason, some way, they think they're built on walk-ons, right? And I don't necessarily disagree with them. I love the idea of a walk. I love the idea of a Jet Bush or a Michael Taft coming out of nowhere and making some of themselves. I like the idea of Kai Woods, the running back that Texas had, going to Nevada and getting a scholarship. I love that kind of thing. But it's college football getting ready to change. I'm not sure that walk-ons in their current iteration are going to be kept because they are the low-hanging fruit to be chopped.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. So
I have a couple of thoughts. One of my thoughts when all this started was from the athlete's perspective, be careful what you wish for. And you knew some early on in this NIL process were going to greatly make a lot of money and it's going to be very beneficial for them. But what was going to be the end game? I've always thought the end game was these guys are going to end up being employees of the state. And I don't think that's really what they got into this for. But I think that's what's going to end up having to happen. And my other thought on this has always been, people think of a scholarship as, room, board, tuition. But a football scholarship at one of these major universities is actually a $500,000 deal. Because you have, like you said, you have your medical, you have your tutoring, you have your cryotherapy, you have the thousands and thousands of dollars of Nike gear. You have all these things that go into this. And these scholarships aren't just room, board, and tuition. They're $500,000 in worth over a 4 or 5 year period.
At least. And one of the, you forgot tutoring.
Yeah.
There. And what Sankey calls it, you talked about cryotherapy and that sort of stuff. He called it concierge medical care.
Right.
Because that's really what it is. You have a doctor on campus. You have something, he gives you penicillin or he sends, and that is unique to college athletes. I mean, I went to Texas. I had to go to the, the health center if I had a cold or something, so, broken arm. What the reality of it is they do have concierge medical health care. There's also the Alston case, which gives them $6,000 a year, each college athlete up to. Then they also have some other aspects that they get, they get spending money, they get free room and board. I mean, in the board right now, the food that they're getting is not your normal dorm food. They get snacks in between with super smoothies. There's all kinds of stuff, and that's all good, in my opinion. I don't have a problem with any of that. The issue now becomes that there's going to be a price to pay as part of this. And one of the questions that immediately comes up and came up yesterday, okay, if there are scholarship reductions, what are the coaches concerned about as it relates to those issues, Jerry and Blake? Okay, they're worried about the health of their players. Okay, you go down and start getting in the 50s or 60s on scholarships, they're going to be like, what is going on here? We don't have a taxi squad. We don't have a waiver wire. Like in pro football, if your 3 quarterbacks go down, you go find Colt McCoy, who's not playing right now, and get him to unretire. Well, guess what? In college football, you got to be a student athlete. You got to be on campus. Who are you going to go get?
And you can make trades too.
yeah. And you can make trade. I mean, there's just all kinds of, those limits are very real for college football and different. The other thing that I would say that is part of that landscape, at least right now, is they're also simultaneously increasing the number of games that teams can play. So you want them to reduce that. So basically safety concerns. Then the other ones, something coaches like to do something called 2 spotting. The number 2 spotting. Okay, that's where they have 2 practices going on simultaneously. You'll have the 1 offense versus the 1 defense, and the 2 and 3 offense, or the 2nd and 4th team offense against the 2nd and 4th team defense. It allows you and your younger players to add depth. Yesterday, for example, in a conversation we had with Steve Sarkisian, in a private one, me and 4 other reporters here, we talked about that idea. Well, Alex January is a great example, and his name was actually brought up. Alex January is a guy that Texas needs and wants to move forward in the process, right? Well, right now, he can be on the 3rd team defense or the 4th team defense and get 28 to 34 live snaps a practice.
Yeah.
If they reduce roster sizes, Alex January is going to be down to 8 to 2 if they reduce it too much. Alex January will be down to 8 to 12 live reps. Well, how is that good for his development? And how is that safer for a young man that's 17, 18 years old to even go into the game in the first place? So it's a twofold risk, right? And all of those things, when you change roster numbers, college football is not pro football. And I would say that it's going to be interesting where all this goes. The other outcome of all of this is, and Jerry King, go back to that Jerry King comment here. Jerry King says the SEC and the Big Ten need to tell the NCAA to hit the door. Here's my takeaway for that for you guys. That's already happened. The SEC, it is clear that whatever the SEC coaches and the Big Ten coaches and athletic directors come up as the blueprint for college sports or college football going forward, that's what the NCAA is going to rubber stamp. I mean, it is abundantly clear based on Greg Sankey's words, the actions I see from athletic directors. These guys are taking the ball and they are being asked to run with it and then go back to the NCAA and tell them what they want. And the NCAA will rubber stamp it. So the idea that the NCAA is overlording this, actually, I think the NCAA is abdicating the overlord. They just want somebody else to tell them what they're supposed to do, as opposed to them coming up with answers, because they've been so horrible about it the last 40 years. I think they're probably finally doing what is supposed to happen. Now, where does that end up? And where does the Big Ten and the SEC come together and meet? Like, do the Big Ten coaches want it this way and the SEC coaches want it that way? There's also NIL that's in the mix of this. That's the third party NIL, not the 22% that's going to be coming from revenues. So how does that factor in? How does that become fair? And I don't know. We don't know all the answers yet. And I'll quote, and I wrote an article this morning for TexasFootball.com. Greg Sankey literally yesterday afternoon ended the press conference being asked, are scholarship reductions or are roster limits coming to college football? And he quoted Bob Dylan. He said, the times, they are changing.
Yeah.
And he left it at that and walked. I mean, not in some kind of crazy way or anything, but he was very, very specific. It was interesting. I mean, just a lot of, I mean, you get a sense, Jerry, too, when you're down here, of just how big the SEC is. I want to mention that. Guys, the SEC is so much different than the Big 12. Yeah. I mean, the amount of people that actually care about big-time college sports. Like, I always thought Kansas State is a good program. They're run right, in my opinion. But they're not big time.
Nah.
The amount of big time programs, Alabama essentially wants the same thing you do. Florida wants the same thing you do. Georgia wants the same thing you do. Tennessee wants the same thing you do. LSU wants the same thing you do. Whereas in the Big 12, there was only one other team that wanted the same thing you do, and that was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And sometimes Oklahoma didn't even want the same thing you do. But in the SEC, there's a lot of like-minded folks talking. And that is a fundamental difference between the SEC and the Big 12. You sense it in the way the media asks questions, the way the head coaches answer questions, the way and by the way, Greg Sankey versus Brett Yormark is hilarious. I mean, those two couldn't be more polar opposites intellectually. I mean, I don't think Greg Sankey's been to a WWE event. I'll just put it that way. I mean, he's extraordinarily intelligent, diligent, chooses his words carefully, not prone to over emotion. Really, really impressed with the commissioner of the SEC at this point.
All right. Well, we got a lot of questions regarding what you just talked about, Bobby. We'll get to those here in a minute. But first, can you tell folks out there about Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm?
Yeah, our friend Adam Lowy sponsors the Wednesday morning coffee and football. We appreciate him very much. If you've been injured in a truck, wreck, car wreck, ATV accident, motorcycle accident, Adam is who you want to call. He and his firm have been doing this successfully for more than 20 years. Literally, they're in the Austin area, but they cover statewide. Give them a call or visit them, lowielawfirm.com. Reach out to Adam. He'll give you a free consultation, no strings attached. Again, lowielawfirm.com. And we very much appreciate Adam and sponsors like Adam, because otherwise, without that, I wouldn't be here in Destin today. To be honest with you, we got to pay the bills, and Adam and our other sponsors help with that, and we appreciate them very much. Thank you.
Okay, y'all. Well, like I said, we will come back to those questions here in just a little bit. But first, decision day today, right, Jerry?
Yeah.
Good news coming for the Longhorns.
Shreveport Calvary Baptist 4-star running back James Simon will announce his decision today here at some point. Texas the favorite over Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU on the peripheral, but really Texas, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Look, I think the relationship with the star choice is a big one here, not only for James Simon, the 4-star running back out of Calvary Baptist, but his father, John Simon, who is a tremendous running back at Louisiana Tech and briefly in the NFL, has been a college coach for over a decade, was also a high school coach in Texas at Dallas Roosevelt, where he was actually the athletic director for a couple of years there. So I think the star choice, I think the offense, the Steve Sarkisian offense, I think the SEC, I think all those things are big in the favor of Texas when you combine them all. Look, going into this official visit today, going into his announcement today, the only official visit he's had scheduled is Texas, June 21st through 23rd. So I think all of us in the industry would be a bit surprised if he didn't announce for the Longhorns later today. Then June 1st, the elite camp's coming up. A big name confirmed, John Turntine III, the 2026 offensive lineman from North Crowley. If you haven't watched John Turntine, you're going to like this video now. I think Turntine, similar to what I said, Dakorien Moore was the best receiver in the state last year. I think John Turntine's been the best offensive line prospect in the state since I first saw him sophomore year. I think he's looking, this is a compliment. It's not anything negative to Kelvin Banks. I think he's better than Kelvin Banks was as a sophomore. I think he's better than most guys I've seen as a sophomore. Obviously, John Turntine's been on campus multiple times. Texas offered him at the Kansas State game last year. I believe that's where he came down with his father. His father was an all Mountain West defensive lineman for Gary Patterson at TCU. But John Turntine will be on campus June 1st. I believe that'll be his third visit to Texas. But he is should be considered one of the very best offensive line prospects in the country in 26. I haven't seen him in person work out at North Crowley. I think his ceiling is pretty much about as high as it gets for an offensive lineman. He's athletic. He's got skinny ankles. He can bend. He's strong. He's aggressive. He's quick. He's super smart. Maybe he's up for valedictorian of his class in 2026 at North Crowley. He can really pass pro, got body quickness, reactive quickness. He's pretty much got it all as an offensive line prospect. Maybe he's 6'4.5" and not 6'6", and maybe his wingspan's 80 instead of 83 or something like that, 81 instead of 83. So there's very few perfect players. But from his age standpoint, I mean, he is a tremendous prospect. So he's confirmed for June 1st as well. Obviously, the quarterbacks are going to take center stage on June 1st. Diabell, Troy Hune, some other guys coming in to throw for Sark and work out for Sark to give it a final shot here before Texas makes a move on a 26 quarterback. But John Turntine, getting him back on campus is big for Texas because he's absolutely one of the best prospects in the state of Texas, regardless of classification.
I love his long arms, Jerry, and the way he moves. He mirrors people. Yeah, that's what you see on film. Not only the blocking, etc., but that's what it takes at the next level. You're going to be going up against guys that are so quick, and so I think that Turntine, you can see that body quickness in the upper body matched with long arms. All right, and gets him there. James Simon expected to commit to Texas today. We're trying to track down exactly what time. There's been a couple of different times mentioned, 12:30. Then somebody said it was going to be this evening.
I think it's
we'll be around. Yeah, I think we'll be matching that and watching that all day long. Hey guys, I want to say something. If you don't mind bringing that up, Blake, Dan Denheim. It's like college football is supposed to be fun, you know. look, it says, I hope college football is not totally ruined. I will tell you this, like all of these problems or issues I've been talking about, the great thing about Greg Sankey, he said, you got to realize this is all behind the scenes stuff that's happening. It's leaking over a little bit to the national media. But one thing that Sankey says that I think is really true, college football's never been more popular. The product on the field is actually getting better and better and better. And as long as the product keeps getting better and they focus on that, they're going to be fine. It's all the behind the scenes ballroom talk that is taking away from the sport a little bit right now. But don't have a negative outlook on that, because frankly, college football has never, ever been more popular.
I wanted to say this, Bobby. I actually think all these changes that are happening in college football, I think college football is about to be more popular than it's ever been. And the reason I say that is more people have hope. There's a playoff system now.
That's true.
There's a 12-team playoff system. 16 teams is on the horizon. I've said this before. If you're an NC State fan, you've had zero hope in football. For how long? Now, if you have a 10-2 season and happen to go 11-2 and win the ACC championship game, you're in a college football playoff. NC State fans actually have a reason to truly follow it with hope. Think about Ole Miss going into this year. I mean, they're ranked, the fourth highest ranked SEC team, third ranked highest ranked SEC team in the polls preseason, but they know they have a really good shot to make the college playoff. Missouri thinks they have hope to be in a college football playoff. College football, once we get through all this, is going to be in the best place it's been, because we're going to be moving in the direction of the NCAA tournament, and it's never going to be that big, but a 16-team playoff format in college football is going to make college football more popular than ever. The people will make more money than ever. It's all headed in the right direction. There's just a lot of winding road to get there. But from a fan's perspective, I think it's about to be more popular than it's ever been, again, because people have hope. I mean, think about, you could see a playoff. You could have a Texas versus Texas A&M college football playoff game a month after playing the rivalry game. I mean, and you could be not the 1, 2, or 3 or 4 seed. I mean, right? I mean, there's just more hope for more people in college football now, and it's going to add to the intrigue. It's going to keep people tuned in, more different fan bases, and we're headed to 2 super conferences, and we need to bring somebody else on to give these opinions too.
Let's do it. I want to make the intro here, if you don't mind, guys.
Go ahead.
You want me to do it, Blake? Is that okay? Joining us is Barry Trammell of the Tulsa World. Barry, I've been reading your stuff since I was, I don't know, since Moby Dick was a minnow. Barry used to write for the Daily Oklahoman. Now he just started his first day at the Tulsa World. He has been one of the scribes covering the Oklahoma Sooners. Barry, how long has it been since you've been covering OU for the papers up in Oklahoma?
The first OU game I ever covered was in 1979, and the Iowa Hawkeyes came to Norman, had a redshirt freshman named Bob Stoops trying to tackle Billy Sims.
Yeah.
So I bet
it didn't go well for Bob Stoops.
No, I guess I could say I've been covering OU since Bob Stoops was a minnow.
Hey, one of the things we want to do on Coffee and Football, guys, going forward, is bring in guys with that have knowledge of other teams, etc. Barry, I saw Brent Venables talk a little bit to some reporters yesterday. He's talking about how he's still working the transfer portal right now. Talked a little bit about his offense. Give people a 35,000-foot view of the OU Sooner program right now as you see it and where they're at in Brent Venables' third year at the helm in Norman.
Well, a couple things. One is, for the first time in forever, I think the OU defense is actually in better shape than the OU offense. Sooners have a totally remade offensive line. I don't know how good it's going to be. It's heavily transfer portal stuff. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's going to be a strange year. The OU defense is not. We're not talking about the Selman brothers, but it wasn't bad last year, and I think it's going to be better than this year. The main guys are back: Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, that kind of crew. So, really good chance that OU is going to be better defensively than offensively, and that hasn't happened since maybe 2001. So, well, the OU talent base is, I think, rising. Brent's recruited pretty well and done fine in the portal, but the talent base was slowly slipping under Lincoln Riley, and it was so slowly that you barely noticed it because he kept having really good teams, but each team was just a little bit less than the previous year. The 17 team that played Georgia in the Rose Bowl, double overtime, great game. Sooners could have won it. Georgia goes to the championship game, loses in overtime to Alabama. So OU is the equal of those teams, those programs back in 17. Since then, that's not the case. The talent base been gradually decreasing to where now there's a significant difference between the Sooners and a top shelf playoff team. So that's Brent's job, is to build that back. I think he is on the upswing in terms of replenishing the talent, but clearly not back to 2017 levels.
Hey, Barry, thanks for joining us. I wanted to ask about Jackson Arnold, because what's interesting for Oklahoma, I thought in the offseason was, you have a decision to make. Do you bring back Dylan Gabriel and take the chance that a Jackson Arnold hits the portal? Because we're in the portal day and age, right? Or do you let the more experienced guy go and go with your younger former five-star recruit? What was the fans' reaction to that? Do you think the Oklahoma fans were behind that? And kind of what have been the early returns on Jackson Arnold? I think Texas fans and some SEC fans have seen the spring game, but what have been the early returns behind the scenes on Jackson Arnold?
The fans thought it was great. The fans believe in recruiting hype. The fans believe in the next young thing. Sort of like the new offensive coordinator is always the most popular guy on campus, and then by October he's a bum. So people thought Jackson Arnold going to be great, going to do fantastic, and maybe he will. Maybe he will. He looks the part. He looks the part. But I thought it was a very curious decision. This is not a program building era. You got to build a team every single year with a vast roster makeover. And the Sooners had one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in college football in 2023, or coming back for 2024 based on 2023. I mean, Dylan Gabriel was the all Big 12 quarterback. I saw a deal, ESPN put out a deal a month or so ago, rating the quarterbacks for 2024. Dylan Gabriel's number 2 behind the guy at Georgia. And the Sooners passed on him, said, go on down the road. We want to use the young guy. Maybe it'll turn out. Maybe it'll go great. Maybe Jackson Arnold will have 2 star-studded years, maybe even 3. But I thought it was a tremendous risk, because you gotta play for this year in college football these days. And Dylan Gabriel clearly is a better quarterback than Jackson Arnold right now.
Let me ask you this: the offense, Seth Luttrell takes over, calling plays there. What does that look like? Are the Sooners going to be better at running back? Is it going to be pass heavy, in your opinion? What is the makeup of that Sooner offense headed into 2024, and where do you think they'll lean on? Throwing the ball, running the ball? Where do you think they'll be?
Well, I think that's going to be determined on what kind of line they end up with. Those guys actually ran blocked fairly well in the spring game. Pass blocked not quite as good. I don't know if we can read anything into that or not. Jackson Arnold is not a statue. He's pretty mobile. He's not as mobile as Dylan Gabriel, but he's fairly mobile. So they can do some things in the, move in the pocket and those kinds of things. But I just think that offensive line is so uncertain that they don't know. The receiving core is probably the strength of the offense. So they want to get those guys the ball. In the portal, they got a really good slot back. Deion Burks is from Purdue, is a really good player, NFL type guy probably. So that's And they got a bunch of Nick Anderson and that crew on the outside. They've got a good wide out, so they want to get those guys the ball. But will they have time to get it to them? We don't know yet. Tailbacks are fine. They don't have any superstars back there. Gavin Sawchuk's the best, but they're really good back there. They can, they'll be fine at tailback. But it's just, what can that offensive line do? They got a new center. They got new guards, tackles. I mean, it's a remade offensive line, and the guys that are back, a couple of veterans, were not the best players a year ago. So it's a big question mark, and I think Seth Luttrell probably goes in. He probably goes into not just August, and not just September, but probably late September, asking the same question of himself that you asked of me. I think the schedule's so easy early. I mean, Tulane and Houston, not terrible teams, but no real test. Also Temple. I mean, they're going to get to Tennessee in Norman late September, really not knowing what they have, and I guess they'll find out when the Vols come to town.
Hey, Barry, I had a super chat here from Jay Lee. Tram is great. Been in OKC for 15 years. Have a lot of respect for him. Always appreciate his perspective there. I know Bobby Burton agrees with that very, very much. What are the last thing I have for you is Oklahoma's schedule first year in the SEC. Kind of your initial thoughts on it. Where do you kind of see the schedule? What are some of the games, obviously, that you think the Oklahoma fan base is really excited about?
Well, the SEC schedule is fascinating because they loaded up on the Sooners in conference, and I know why they did it. I mean, this is a business. In case anybody hadn't noticed, the SEC is a business.
Yes,
and a year ago or 8 months ago, whenever this schedule was formulated, it seemed pretty clear that the fortunes for Texas in 2024 were going to be higher than the fortunes for Oklahoma. So if you're Greg Sankey, you're propping up your league every way you can. And I think they made the decision, hey, when we got to pick between these teams, half the league's playing Oklahoma, half the teams playing Texas. Let's give Texas the best edge to make the playoff, get a high seed, because they're much more likely to be in that position than the Sooners. So I get it. I understand it. That's what the SEC's done forever. That's why they've been playing 8 conference games. That's why they do a lot of things. That's why they play a 1AA opponent in mid-November. So this is not just happenstance. Bunch of coaches around the coffee shop on Saturday morning trying to figure out, the high school football schedule. These guys are deep. So OU got saddled with a really tough schedule. They're playing road games at Missouri, Ole Miss, Auburn, and LSU. And when Auburn is your easiest place to go on the road, that's a rough schedule. Sooners only get 3 home games. This is the year their Texas game is deemed the OU home game. So they only play 3 games in Norman, and Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina. So 6 of the 15. 6 of the 8 SEC games are basically in most people's top 20. Yep. When you look at Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas. So, if the Sooners can get to 5-3, that's a pretty good season in the schedule. What do people excited about? Oklahoma's going places they've never been. They've never played in Oxford. They've never played in Auburn. They've never played in Baton Rouge. So it's a brave new world and an exciting new world. For whatever reason, I think Texas is probably a little different. I haven't really studied it, but historically, OU never looked south all that much. When in the old Big 8 days, of course, they played a lot of Southwest Conference teams, and then a lot of Pac-8, Pac-10 type teams. They didn't go to the Big 10 that much. They didn't go to the ACC that much. They didn't go to the SEC that much. That changes, of course, has changed some over the last 20 years, and now it changes dramatically with this SEC schedule.
I've got to ask you, Barry, thank you so much. And one last question for you before we let you go. We know you got stuff to do at your new job at the Tulsa World. Congratulations on the new gig.
Thanks.
I gotta ask you the OU take and the state of Oklahoma take on the split of Oklahoma going to the SEC and Oklahoma State staying in the Big 12. What was that like, the covering? What are you thinking about it as it relates to that? And where is it now? Is Mike Gundy like gonna, spit on the grave of every Sooner on the way out the door?
Well, I mean, yeah, Gundy got the best revenge he could by winning that last Bedlam. He's won 2 of the last 3. He had trouble beating the Sooners for the longest time, but now he's won 2 of the last 3. This was a rivalry that ought to be played. It became a national brand. Bedlam became a national brand the last 20 years. I think we've had 5 Bedlams that have been game day has come to Norman or Stillwater in the last 20 years. So it's become a national brand and a really good game, and all kinds of fascinating things happen. But you're hard pressed to find masses from either side that wish it was still being played. Most of the fans, the Sooners have the sort of the superiority complex and say, we don't need those guys. We're glad to be rid of them. Cowboy fans are saying, you know what? They got a $200 million athletic budget. They want more money. We don't need that game. And, there's factions of each school where, hey, we ought to play. And of course they ought to play. Same as A&M and Texas ought to play. And every other natural rival ought to play. But college football being what it is, things happen, business decisions are made, and people get their feelings hurt, and coaches are always looking for an easier game, and we're not playing. So the media wants it, the non-passionate fan wants it, saying, why wouldn't they play Bedlam? But a lot of the hardcores don't seem to mind that it's gone. I think both schools will miss it eventually. It might take some, Chinese water torture to get them to get it, but I do think both will, because games like that are what make college football special. OU playing Temple and OU playing Maine and OU playing South Carolina. That's not what any of us got interested in this sport for. We got interested because Oklahoma is playing Oklahoma State, or Texas A&M is playing Texas, or the Longhorns are going to go play Michigan. And that's one of the draws of the new realignment and the new conferences, right? I mean, OU's playing Alabama. Alabama's coming to Norman. Georgia's coming to Austin this year.
Yep.
Michigan's playing Oregon. Ohio State, I can't remember if they're playing USC, but a lot of cool matchups.
Yes.
And we need more of those, not less. We're getting more, but they came at the cost of others. So when we get to where we got all the cool matchups, as many as we can, we're all going to be better off.
Barry Trammell, Tulsa World, thank you so much. I've got so many more questions. Hopefully you'll be able to come on with us. I mean, I want to ask you about Texas versus OU. I want to ask you about OU's NIL apparatus and how that's working out. There's just so many questions where Texas and OU, besides the second Saturday in October, are tied together and kind of tied at the hip. And Barry, you're just tremendous, man. And best of luck in your new venture with the Tulsa World. And thanks for spending time with us this morning.
You bet. Glad to do it, guys.
All right, buddy. Be good.
Thank you, Barry.
Just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talked about institutional knowledge of sports or a team, Barry's.
When you can
recall, trying to tackle Billy Sims, I don't think that was fair for Bob.
Yeah, when you can talk about Bob Stoops at Iowa coming downhill to try to tackle Billy Sims, right? I mean, there you go. That's all you need to hear. Hey, Blake, I'm going to take like 2 or 3 minutes real quick for some recruiting speed.
Go it.
Okay.
Go it.
All right, Augusta Horn. How did RT lose a much-needed big to Tech? We kind of talked about this on the show a few times or last few days. Once that thing got to 7 figures, Texas wasn't going there. No, so similar to a football recruitment of recently, it's just That Texas had they made a run, but once it got to a certain number, they weren't going there.
Hey, Gary, you used the term "the juice is not worth the squeeze." That's what happened.
I think that's the kind of the tough thing. And, you know, in the NIL world as it currently sits, you know, you give somebody twice as much as other guys and they know it, what happens? So there's decisions that have to be made there. Some desperate times call for desperate measures for some programs. Obviously, that's what happened with Toppin, in my opinion. All right. Let's see. Jay Lee worried about our D-line recruiting. We have to start doing absolutely whatever it takes and not miss on guys like Dom Williams. And I think you're talking Dominic McKinley. And I think you're talking about Zion Williams and then this. But yeah, so here's what I say about D-line recruiting. We talked about this on I think yesterday on one of the shows. So I think Texas has to get 3 of these guys in this class. 3 of the guys, you have to keep Brandon Brown committed. Then you have Josiah Sharma, Kevin Wynn out of Georgia, Zion Williams, Myron Charles. I mean, Texas has to find a way to win on 3 of those guys. If you can have that as a 3-man class, and then you take a 4th guy as a developmental guy. You know, DJ Sanders brought up a lot. He's a developmental guy. He's different than these other guys. It's going to take time. So what's some of those a developmental guy, if you go that route, if you take 4 high school guys, or is their senior year evaluation flip, which I would not put out of the question, because D linemen, those guys, those guys gain weight. They grow a little later, like the offensive and D line guys. They develop later physically. So sometimes you may want to save a spot for a senior year guy in that regard as well. Somebody committed to another school that senior tape's really good, and you go back and you get before December. But they need to win 3 of the battles on the major top 5, 6 guys on the board, in my estimation. And we'll see what happens there. I actually there's a couple of those fringe guys that I've been staying in contact with, like Chase Sims, Richmond Randall. Talked with him yesterday. Texas hadn't set up an official visit with him at this point in time. So I think he's got he already went to SMU, and he's got Arkansas, he's got A&M, he's got Texas Tech, and he has one other one coming up. So look, I mean, Texas, by them not setting up a visit with somebody like that, that may tell you they feel confident about some other guys right now. We'll see how it plays out. Any update on Jonah Williams, Keelan Russell? Jonah Williams, look, I mean, we've been saying that one's more of a long shot for Texas. Jonah Williams loves baseball too. I think that's gonna be a potential. There you go. It depends on his brother went pro baseball instead of going college baseball. We'll see what happens there. We have a bunch of questions on the receivers.
Hey, Jerry.
Yes.
Real quick, before you get to those questions from the receivers, do you mind telling folks out there about Omaha Steaks real fast? Sorry.
Yeah, I can do that for sure. With Father's Day right around the corner, what do you give to a man that has everything? Easy. You give him an experience he'll never forget. You give him Omaha Steaks. By the way, I ate the steaks last night for dinner. Tremendous. The Father's Day experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to put a smile on the big guy's face this summer with a hand-selected gift packages starting at just $89. Go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code ONTEXAS, all caps, at checkout for an additional discount when you shop gourmet gift packages for Father's Day. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. Endless flavor, endless variety, and endless value. Truly, they have perfected more than steak, and your dad is guaranteed to love every bite. Go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code ONTEXAS, all caps, to get an exclusive savings. Shop for unforgettable gifts that are guaranteed to make Dad's day. Because if there's one thing Omaha Steaks knows, it's dads want steak. That's omahasteaks.com. Use promo ONTEXAS. And by the way, the chicken, everything that we got sent to us, guys, I know Blake's family ate it all in about 12 hours. But everything's been tremendous at Omaha Steaks, and I love the steaks. I'm a steak guy. You can find me at Outback or Texas Roadhouse when I'm on the road going to schools, that's for sure. But Omaha Steaks, tremendous. I will be ordering more.
That's what I get from my dad for Christmas and or Father's Day coming up. Obviously, I'm going to do that as well. So I think it's great. Hey, Jerry, there was another question I wanted you to get to real quick, and that's at Tyler Thomas, the offensive lineman out of Dickinson. committed to A&M yesterday. It was interesting, the timing of that, because earlier in the day you had said Texas had canceled his official visit. He immediately then commits to A&M hours later. Was that just happenstance, or was Texas out and came back? Or what was the order of operations of that situation?
Yeah, I think Texas was Tyler's top choice, but Jackson Christian, Devin, Jordan Coleman committed to Texas. Texas told him, look, they just didn't have room. So if you're Tyler Thomas, you're going to A&M or Texas. I mean, LSU was there. They were a third school he's considered. You better jump on A&M quick if you want to go to one of those two schools. And that's what's been interesting is I think Tyler Christian, Jackson Christian, Tyler Thomas, right there in that group. I think one of those guys was going to go to Texas. One of those guys was going to go to A&M. That's just how things were going to play out there from the Texas side. I mean, Tyler's got a lot of family in Austin. I think Texas was on him earlier, and I, he broke his foot his junior year, missed, I think, 9 games, essentially is what he missed, 8.5 games. Came back strong, looked good when I was there in January, looked good in the spring. Good prospect. It's a deep year for offensive linemen in Texas. I mean, a deep year. And that's what we've been saying is, Texas is going to have a really good offensive line class. A&M has to have a really good offensive line class because they're in a similar position to 2022 class when Sark and Flood, when those guys got to Austin, that you had to make hay on the offensive line. And I'll tell you what this is kind of doing. It's, Devin and Jordan Coleman picked Texas over Oklahoma, right? Tyler Thomas picks A&M at the time, then because Texas told them they didn't have space, over LSU. LSU been a little tougher recruiting offensive linemen in Texas right now for them. Oklahoma, Texas beats Oklahoma on the Coleman brothers from Cedar Hill. So obviously Oklahoma's done a lot of work in the portal, but Texas and Texas A&M both taking big offensive line classes this year, meaning they're going to sign 10 guys combined on the offensive line. 8 of those guys could come from in-state. That makes it tougher on Oklahoma and LSU recruiting in Texas. And that's one of the things that comes with that. So not surprising, Tyler Thomas committed to Texas A&M after Texas took 3 offensive line commitments in about an 9-day period. Then we had questions on this. A lot of questions have come up. 3 5-star receivers. Look, I'm going to say what I have been saying. I know it's popular in the industry. I know it's a click driver. I know it gets a lot of attention. I'm still at lower odds that all 3 of those guys end up at the same school when all's said and done. You have NIL. It's not just kids, it's parents. It's the people around the kids. What's best situations for kids. I still think the odds are higher that Texas gets 2 of those guys versus getting 3 of those guys. That is a very rare occurrence. Not saying it's out of the question. I just think there's a lot of things that come into play that aren't being talked about now that will be talked about in late June, early July. We'll see how things play out. I'm still more of Texas has better odds to get 2 of those guys than actually get all 3 of those guys.
And I want to be clear, some comments about favorites and all this other stuff. Who if they get French and Lockett, are they going to be out with DK Moore? I want to, Jerry, you've said this perhaps as well as anybody. And when you start talking about how good John Turntine is as an offensive tackle, like you did, like we talked about Colin Simmons as an edge prospect last year, or Ryan Wingo as a wide receiver prospect, there are certain guys that are a notch ahead.
Yeah,
even of the 5 stars. DK Moore is the priority.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that everybody's not a priority at some level, but Dakorien Moore is the guy right now for Texas as it relates to receiver recruiting. Doesn't mean Jamie French isn't highly touted, and Khalil Lockett and Kelshawn Johnson, all of those guys. Dakorien Moore is a top 5 player in the country. Okay. He is set aside as different. So don't think because Texas might get other receivers ranked below him that's somehow going to affect him as well. It's not. Texas has prioritized him, and Steve Sarkisian's prioritized him from the outset.
Yeah. So and here's the thing to think about, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but think about how some recruitments have played out. Let's just say that Dakorien Moore and Jamie French committed to Texas. Well, then the guys competing for Khalil Lockett may come with some big NIL deal that you just can't do anything about, or you're willing to do anything about. That's where things are different in recruiting nowadays. Is the competition may say, "Whoa, Texas got 2 of these guys. We can't get caught with 0," and they may make some boom. Like Tennessee did it for 1 receiver last year. They were either going to take Matthews or Ryan Wingo. And for Texas fans, be glad it was, Matthews, right? But they went above and beyond for 1 guy. And nobody else was going to go that high. And I think the guy's a tremendous player. But that's just kind of what you deal with now in the NIL space as it currently sits. So I think there's a lot that has to play out. And then, the other things that play out and where things can change in recruiting is if 2 of those guys jump in, maybe a family in a circle of a third guy says, you know what? Hey, look, maybe this is a better spot right here for you now. And it's not about running away from competition or anything like that. It's just how a lot of times how recruiting plays out. Look, Jordan Davison was a lock for Texas how many months ago? Jamie French was a lock for Ohio State 2 months ago. Some people say he was silently committed to Ohio State. Things change, and they change for a multitude of reasons. So June will be the deciding factor on a lot of this stuff.
There you go. Good stuff. Well, guys, something else that's good stuff is the number of conference championships that the Longhorns have won. We're going to start here. And 15 Big 12 championships, which is the conference record for most titles in a single season. But it's also the most conference championships won by a school this year in the nation. And I got to looking at this. We talked about it off air this morning. I'm going to share this as well. So these are the number of postseasons qualified for in the 6 major sports in the Power 5. 3 teams are at the top here: Texas, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. And then you can see the rest there on the screen. But what a exiting party, I guess you could say, for the Longhorns as they leave the Big 12 and get ready to enter the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, look, softball team is coming up on a big series, a big College World Series. We talked about that. The football team, obviously, in the college football playoffs. Women's volleyball won the national title. Texas is firing on a lot of the right cylinders right now. They just really are. I talked briefly with Chris Del Conte yesterday. He couldn't really talk to the media at large. And, he's just in a great situation right now. It's all about the guys here in Destin trying to navigate all of it to what's next, in my opinion. So if they can navigate this little bump in the road as they see it, these questions are all hard as far as scholarship reductions and NIL and, Title IX, all these things coming together at once with this House settlement. Once they navigate that, it's more about the field of play. And that is where I think Steve Sarkisian, Rodney Terry, guys like Jarrett Elliott and Vic Schaefer, they've got the program going in the right direction, and they're going to be able to execute against whatever the plan or whatever the rules are. I like where Texas sits right now as an athletic department.
Yeah.
That number that you just showed is indicative of that, Blake. But really, really good situation right now if you're Texas, because I think that Texas is situated where not only are they already performing well overall, I think they're going to be able to take and adapt to whatever the new rules are as well or better than others, because they're going to be sitting in the catbird seat. They really will be. I think we're entering into a golden era of Texas athletics across the board. And we may already be there, actually, guys, in some respects. Texas likely to win the Directors' Cup again. So we actually may already be there in some regards.
Hey, Blake, bring that back up real quick.
Yeah.
22, your top 22 there, 11 are SEC. I mean, the conference is, Bobby talked about earlier, the conference is unbelievable. I mean, this is going to be, obviously football's the moneymaker, right? The NCAA tournament's huge, obviously moneymaker. But all sports are going to be so competitive even more so with Texas and OU moving in to the SEC. I mean, 11 of the top 22 on that list there of 6 major sports or from the SEC, Bob.
How about this? How about this stat from yesterday? Greg Sankey went to the mic. 11 SEC baseball teams are in the super regionals right now. They only have 14 teams in the conference right now.
Yeah, and Texas and OU are in it as well. So you're 13 of your 16 are in regional baseballs.
Yes, super regional, not just regional, but super
It's regionals. It's regionals.
Regionals right now.
Super regional. I'm sorry. So, but my point being, I'm sorry. This is the first. I'm thinking of softball.
You're good.
But my point being is, it is a level here in Destin. When I go into those rooms right now, and they're having spring meetings here at Destin. If you're just now joining us, and I'm down in Destin doing this, it is a lot of like-minded schools in the SEC compared to what Texas fans would be accustomed to. Where, look, I like Kansas State, I like Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Those are fine places and all this other stuff. They don't have the expectation levels that are had in the SEC among big-time schools. They just don't. And instead of Texas trying to drag other people along in the Big 12, they're entering much more a conference of peers that want to all get together and figure out how to be the super conference. What's it going to take to be the very best? The Big 12 wasn't really trying to be the very best conference. They were a Me Too conference. You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, we're one of the top 5. You may be 3, 4, or 5 in a given year, while the SEC's goal is to be number 1, period, each and every year. And you see that and sense that in the folks you talk to, the athletic directors you hear, the conference commissioner that's spoken twice now publicly. It's very clear that there's a fundamental difference with the SEC and between the SEC and the Big 12 that is tangible. I mean, you can feel it in the room.
I wanted to hit on this because we had this question earlier at start. I thought it was a good one. Question for the panel. Could you guys realistically see an FSU and Clemson next team to join the SEC? I don't know if there's been any talk about that down there, Bobby. I think there's more stuff going on. But what's going to be so interesting for me with this is A&M didn't want, obviously, Texas in the SEC, right? It took away an inherent advantage of being in the SEC for Texas A&M in recruiting. But do you think Florida wants FSU and Miami in the SEC? No. But it doesn't mean they're going to get their wish. Do you think Georgia ideally wants Clemson in the SEC? Probably not. Doesn't mean they're going to get their wish. I think what's going to be so interesting when we talk about recruiting is if Miami and FSU eventually go into the SEC, if recruiting in the state of Florida just got more difficult for everybody, because then you'd have 3 SEC teams, power teams in that state. So there's going to be, as this thing kind of continues to mold itself into 24 teams, which I think both these conferences will have 24 teams one day. If Florida State and Miami end up getting into the SEC, if they both go that direction, if it can happen, then recruiting in Florida just got more difficult. That's kind of the recruiting pieces to some of this, Bobby.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. South Carolina wouldn't want Clemson in there in there either.
No,
we were at Greg Sankey was asked about expansion yesterday at the press conference he held. He goes, "Look, I'm not saying we wouldn't talk about expansion, but expansion is not on his mind right now."
No.
I'm telling you guys, it is clear the changing rules and structure of college sports with 22% revenue share is what is on his mind. It's what is on every administrator's mind. It's on what's part of these coaches' minds. They're trying to work through that right now. I'm not saying, he said never say never on conference expansion, essentially, but right now he is not feeling it. He's trying to navigate through what they have and what they can be as is. And I will say this as it relates to FSU. FSU has been rumored to be thinking about going the private equity route. to buy themselves potentially out of their contract with the SEC or with the ACC, excuse me. Greg Sankey was not real high on private equity playing a role in college athletics. He goes, why? Those guys are interested because of money. They think they can make money. You know, should they be really involved in a state institution's money-making expertise? Probably not. He was not high on, if FSU goes the private equity route, he sees more problems with that than possibilities. So I would caution the whole idea of private equity getting involved with college sports a little bit more than what he wants. The good thing about the SEC, guys, 16 teams in it, only one private institution. And so he is dealing with a lot of big universities that don't have these financial issues that maybe an FSU might have trying to get out of a contract. And I don't think he wants to embroil his membership in those issues of others. So he would like to be able to operate outside of private equity with his constituency.
I have one other thing on the SEC I want to hit on, because I think this is actually an interesting topic that we now, Texas fans now care about more, right? The SEC was just another conference, so they added the title game. I'm a little different on that. When the SEC took off was a couple of reasons to me. The decline, when Bobby Bowden started to decline at FSU, and when Miami had all their issues. Then the SEC won the arms race. They won the facilities war. They got smart. So when these kids started traveling out and seeing the country and 7-on-7 and all going all these camps, the SEC facilities wise was above and beyond everybody else. But I just want to think about this. When FSU was on top of college football, and really the state of Florida was on top of college football in the 90s. You had FSU, Miami, both winning multiple titles, right? Being in the hunt every single year. Then you had Florida. I mean, you had Bobby Bowden, Spur. You had big personalities. They were dominating college football, that state. So once Miami's probations, all those things hit, once Bobby Bowden starts to get up there in age and FSU starts declining. So think about this just from a South Carolina perspective. When Spurrier went to South Carolina, the years before that, Jadeveon Clowney probably goes to FSU in the heyday of Florida State, right? Marcus Lattimore probably doesn't go to South Carolina. He probably heads to FSU in Bobby Bowden's heyday. Then I'm just going to read some names here. These are guys that Nick Saban got out of South Florida, Dade, Broward County at Alabama. Dallas Turner, Jordan Battle. It's going to take me a couple of minutes to go through some of these guys now. Amari Cooper, and all the receivers. I mean, I'm getting up to these guys now. It's taking me. Jerry Jeudy, okay, guys that I covered nationally at the time. I mean, you go through that list of guys. Calvin Ridley, all those first-round picks would have been at Miami or Florida State in the 90s, early 2000s. You put all that together, and that's kind of the rise of the SEC. Now, with great leadership at the SEC, but that's kind of what led to that rise. And think about when Urban Meyer went to Florida. It was great timing for Urban Meyer because Miami had their issues, and Bobby Bowden was starting to decline a little bit at FSU. And so it's all sort of timing things related to, but just think back to some of those recruitments that Spurrier won at South Carolina when FSU wasn't the team in college football. And think about the issues Miami had, combined with at the same time Bobby Bowden was getting older and Nick Saban takes the Alabama job. And look at all those first and second round picks Alabama got out of South Florida. You don't get those in the 90s when Miami and FSU and Florida were all on top of college football.
I will say this. I slightly disagree with you, Jerry. I think the beginning of the SEC dominance of college football is much similar to when it occurred simultaneously almost to when the Big East became the 800-pound gorilla in college basketball for a long period of time. And that was with the birth of ESPN. And so all of a sudden, Saturday night games were in Death Valley in Baton Rouge, or they were in the Swamp, and everybody was tuning into those, or they were in Bryant-Denny or in Knoxville with 100,000 screaming fans, and people didn't even know nationally that these things truly existed at that scale. So I feel like the SEC, and that is about the same time, frankly, ABC made the deal to get the SEC championship game back then as well. And so it kind of builds on that. But I think it started then, and then you had characters arise out of it. And you mentioned character. There's no bigger character in 90s college football than Steve Spurrier. I mean, he was the guy. And so I think it all built on itself. And it's been the top dog for longer than people want to realize. But we'll see. I think there's also, they finally recognized that they capitalized on the homegrown talent in the Deep South more readily. Whereas teams like Michigan State, even in the 60s and early 70s, went to the Deep South and had a lot of success. They went to Texas, got a guy named Bubba Smith out of Beaumont. So I think that the 80s were really the start of it with the rise of ESPN. And then, to your point, they had really good management and leadership and consistent leadership, first with Mike Slive and now with Greg Sankey. And I'm really, really sitting here in Destin this week. I'm really, really impressed with the SEC. I really am. And you can see why they are the preeminent conference college football. They treat it with the respect and gravitas it deserves. I'm literally, the SEC is a cut above. It really is, and it has been, and it shows when we're down here and seeing guys from around the country. I mean, look, when I go to Big 12 meetings, there might be one or two national reporters here at the meetings. I go here, every single national reporter is at the meeting. If you're anybody, you're here from a national reporting perspective. It's just different.
Before we move on to our last question or two, can you tell folks out there about Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm?
Yeah, absolutely. I just mentioned that we're down here in Destin. We would not be this would not be possible without the help of our sponsors. We appreciate Adam and his group at the Lowy Law Firm for their ongoing sponsorship. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, a motorcycle accident, ATV, what have you, give Adam and his group a call or visit them online at lowylawfirm.com. It's really simple. They'll give you a free consultation to discuss whether or not you might be due some compensation, and y'all can take it from there. It is no strings attached. Again, lowylawfirm.com. Adam, and to our other sponsors, we really appreciate you guys making coffee and football possible at this level. We really do.
We have a super chat we need to get to real quick, guys, from Hooked to AT. And he says, when's the last time OU had a winning quarterback that wasn't a transfer Heisman candidate? Bradford, maybe? Landry Jones? Somewhere in there.
Yeah, Bradford would be – well, Landry Jones was a winning quarterback, but a great quarterback that wasn't a transfer, it would definitely have to be Sam Bradford, because Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, and Dylan Gabriel and Jalen Hurts, all transfers.
And then our last question, by the way, thank you, Hook to a T. We appreciate the super chat. Our last question here comes from Justin Rosenthal. He says, what's more important in your opinion, a top-tier transfer class or a top-tier high school recruiting class?
I think they're both important. I don't think it's either or. You know, a lot of times we want to make things either or when I think it takes both. I really do believe that. I think that you can get healthy fast. And Jerry's talked about this. There's no reason to be a poor football team anymore. There's no reason to say wait till next year.
Yeah, we're inexperienced. We're inexperienced this year. Come on.
Yeah, it's there. It's out. That's out. That's done.
It's done.
The other thing I would say in this, at the same time, you have to have guys in the pipeline that are ready to go. I mean, what is Texas better off with Cam Williams now starting at right tackle after 2 years a development, or should they have went and gotten a senior out of the transfer portal? I'm of the opinion that you can do it either way or both ways. But I think long term, Texas will reap some benefit for it being Cameron Williams, because they also had him there to start a game when Christian Jones went down against Kansas State, right? So you get more than just 1 year out of non-transfer guys. I also want to say this, Jerry, to your point that you always make about adapting and saying, no excuses. Sark's comment yesterday to the media, one of the things he said is, I don't believe in, questions about, are you worried about this? Are you worried about that? He wants to know solutions and find solutions. And to him, that means the transfer portal sometimes. I got to mention this before we get going, because I know we're running late on time. Sark also said yesterday, Jerry and Blake, they are done in the portal unless an opportunity presents itself. So he did leave that caveat out there, but right now that means no punter at all in this class unless an opportunity presents itself. But he does not see themselves going for anybody else in the portal.
Hey, I want to say this about the portal versus high school. It's going to be so interesting to look at look back in a few years. Ole Miss is going to be your case this year, right? I mean, what, they bring in 26 guys out of the portal, some crazy number like that. So look at FSU. 9 of their 10 draftees were transfer portal guys, right? Great. Literally, Mike Norvell was on the hot seat. He got off the hot seat with the portal, not high school recruiting, because FSU had fallen. They weren't beating Nick Saban and Kirby Smart on the guys they needed to win on to ascend quicker. So the high school recruiting, I think, so for Blue Bloods, I think it's still huge, huge, huge. And then you go to the portal and get your future NFL draft picks at positions you need. So I think for the Blue Bloods it is. But what's interesting is that's going to be that you look back on is you take in all these transfers in a 1 year period of time. How many of those guys really care about the jersey they're wearing versus care about themselves? That's always the toughest thing. So it looked amazing for FSU until Jordan Travis's injury. And then none of those guys wanted to play in the bowl game, and they lost 63-3, and it sets back your program from a perception standpoint. So it's so interesting to look at, and that's one of the things I love about the 12-team, 16-team playoff, where things are headed with, I think, these going to be more contract-based with NIL versus how it is structured now. And these guys are going to have to play. I mean, there's no reason for 30 guys to sit out of a bowl game at FSU. They were one of the top 5 teams in the season. But were those guys actually all in on FSU? Doesn't seem like they were. So to me, that's the interesting thing about the portal. And we'll see Ole Miss is going to be the team I'm watching this year with that. They brought in a lot of talented guys. 3 starters on the offensive line, 3 defensive linemen. How many of those guys are all in on Ole Miss football this year versus being all in on just themselves this year and transferred to a program where had good NIL and is ranked high? Because it can go one of 2 ways. And it could be great for Ole Miss, and they could capitalize on it and make a run to a national title game, right? I mean, it's not out of the question. You could do that with the talent they're going to have in a third-year starting quarterback and a really good play caller. But can you bring that all together in 1 year and make it all work? I think that's what's going to be interesting to watch. I think the FSU thing was fascinating to me last year, Bobby, because 9 of 10 guys drafted were transfers. But then after the Jordan Travis injury and they weren't in the playoff and they thought they got slided, they packed it in. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how things play out in the future.
Hopefully, if there are any new contracts that come about with college football players, they'll include playing through the entire season as part of that. I was at there was a cocktail hour last night for the SEC meetings, and I spoke to a couple of different guys that were there representing the bowl games. And, That is an issue that's on their mind.
Yeah.
You know, how do they remain relevant? It's something else to think about. How do the bowl games remain relevant in light of a 12-team, 14-team college football playoff? Just another byproduct of what we're going through right now as it relates. Hey, a couple things before we let y'all go. I hope everybody stayed safe yesterday. Horrible weather in the state of Texas. I saw some photos in Dallas. My God. I mean, a plane was moving on the tarmac from the wind. I saw houses in East Texas. Just, guys, stay safe out there. Also, when I say thank you to our sponsors, I want to also say thank you to all of our listeners. Those sponsors wouldn't be possible without the listeners. It really wouldn't be. And so thank y'all to all making this possible. I hope to bring y'all as much news and info as we can on the Longhorns for a long period of time. You guys have been great, and I hope that we've done you a service in the process as well, because I think it all works together to make Texas a special place and a special team to follow compared to others as well. So anyways, I just want to throw that out there. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate Adam Lowy, Omaha Steaks as well. And Blake, I don't know what y'all been doing and talking about the last 2 days, but I've got to get over and get back to these events. Chris Del Conte talking later today as well. We got James Simon commitment coming up at some point today. A lot of stuff going on.
That's right. It's an action-packed day, so be sure, if you haven't already, to hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell so you're notified anytime a video is posted, anytime we go live. That way you don't miss a thing. And then head on over to On Texas Football and join in on OnTexasFootball.com and join in on the discussion over there. Around the clock, CJ, Jerry, Bobby, all bringing the goods, and you won't miss a thing between the YouTube channel and the website. And yeah, for Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Hook 'em.